welcome to episode 74 of React Native Radio. I'm your host, Nader Dabbit. Today on our panel, we have Peter Pikarczyk.
Hey, everybody.
Kevin Old.
Hello, everyone.
And our special guest today is Garrett McCullough from Build.com. Welcome to the show, Garrett.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. So, we brought Garrett on today to kind of talk about, our topic is going to be building an e-commerce application, I guess, in React Native. And we're going to talk to Garrett about his kind of experience doing that. But we're also going to talk about kind of all of our experience, really, and what libraries are out there and what things that you need that go into, I guess, an e-commerce app. So we'll talk about things like authentication, payment processing, things of that nature, even maybe third-party libraries and things like that, other things that'll help us out. But before we get into the topic, Garrett, can you introduce yourself and talk about how you got into React Native and how you got into working at Build.com?
Yeah, sure. So, like you said, my name is Garrett McCullough. I am a senior mobile engineer for Build.com. I work in React Native, though, so I'm primarily a JavaScript engineer. I've been with Build for about 15 months now, and I joined Build to work on the React Native application. So prior to Build, I'd been working for a company doing real estate valuation software, and a good friend of mine that I've known since high school took the job at Build.com as the director of mobile experience. And after talking to him about what they were working on and what some of the challenges were, it was a really interesting opportunity. And so they brought me over to work on the React Native team. Prior to Build, I had been working with Angular JS, the kind of 1.4, 1.5 code. And so when I switched over to Build, I quickly had to learn React, Redux, and React Native, which is quite a bit to learn.
So before you got into React Native, kind of what were you programming, just out of curiosity?
Yeah, we were working on a SaaS application for mortgage companies, essentially. So it was real estate valuation software. And essentially what the company does is, so if you're getting a mortgage, the bank has to do a lot of due diligence to make sure that you're not overvaluing your property. And they are not allowed to be in direct contact with the appraiser, however. So there's a lot of barriers that are set up so that the bank isn't influencing the appraiser on the valuation of the property. The company I worked for is called Clear Capital, and they are one of these companies that sits in between the mortgage bank and the appraiser, and they handle the communication in between them so that there's no influence in put upon the appraiser or anything. And then also, because we have a large network of appraisers and real estate brokers, a bank can come to us and they can say, hey, we have 10,000 properties that we need to get appraised by next Friday. What can you do? And we take that list of properties, put them into our system, farm them out. We do all the quality assurance, and then we send back the final report back to the bank. The software that I was working on was specifically, we were taking the tools that we had developed in-house, and we were selling those tools to the mortgage bank so that they could do their own quality assurance on the reports that we or other companies had provided.
So can you essentially kind of talk about what the app that you work on at Build.com, like what does it do? I know it does e-commerce, but kind of what all do you sell and things like that? Also, can you talk about what you've chosen as far as frameworks and that type of thing at Build.com for your React Native app?
Yeah, of course. So Build.com is one of the largest retailers, online retailers for home improvement goods. So we sell things like faucets, toilets, bathtubs, refrigerators, flooring, kind of anything that you would need to remodel your house, except for, we don't really do lumber, things like that. But pretty much everything else, we have it covered. And We only sell online. We've been in existence since around 2001, I believe, or 2000. And our app allows you to purchase anything off of our web that would normally be sold on our website through the app. We also have a lot of other features that we're working on too. So besides the normal e-commerce stuff, we have to handle a lot of sort of special cases where you can't UPS a refrigerator. You have to have it delivered by freight. So a lot of our items are these large things that need to be handled with a freight delivery, which means that you need to set up a delivery date, and you need to be able to pick your time and everything. So there's that. We also, because a lot of our remodel project is a large project, and our customers are typically buying a lot of things from us, they want to be able to plan out in advance what they're going to be purchasing. So we have some, and we're building more project management features where you can organize things into groups, you can favorite things, and you can really sort of plan out your remodeling project in advance. In terms of frameworks, we're on React Native. I think it's 45. We use Redux. We use Redux Thunk, and we're on the React Native or React 16 Alpha, I think it is. So that's sort of our stack for the front end.
In terms of clientele, who is this like targeted for? Is it targeted for like individual consumers like me who might be redoing my bathroom, or is it targeted towards like the carpenter, for example, who, may be ordering, 5 kitchen faucets or 50 kitchen faucets?
Yeah, so we work with both kinds of consumers. So the app, we sort of say our target market is the 45-year-old woman in the Midwest, I think, is our user persona that we shoot for. But really, we have a lot of consumer people like yourself, and we also have a lot of people we call them pros, where they're in some sort of trade. So they're a plumber or a carpenter or something. For people who are in that pro market, we have a lot of features where you can set up a pro account. You get a special pricing on that. You can also you can get a representative. So if you're doing a lot of purchases, you can actually we have a large call center, but you can get a rep assigned to you, and you can say, I only want to talk with Mary. She's going to handle all my business, and that way you can have a direct line to that person. They'll be your representative. They'll do research for you. You can send. I've heard of contractors who will text people or text their rep a picture, and the rep will find it and purchase it or place the order on their behalf. So we really try and focus a lot on that sort of more personalized care. So if you look in our app or on our website, our phone number is featured prominently. So you can call up, during normal business hours, and we really try to make it a great experience. The first time I ever had an interaction with Build.com was actually when I was remodeling my own house, and this was probably 7 years ago. So it was well before I had ever heard of Build as considered working there. But my wife called up the company and explained what we needed in terms of lighting for our kitchen. They did all of the research. They found a number of options for her, and they emailed her links to those options, and then she just made the final selection. So they do a really good job of that.
That's super cool. I used to work at Trunk Club here in Chicago, and it sounds like Build.com has like a similar approach. Trunk Club is a fashion store, so men's and women's clothing brands, right? But like your primary point of contact is with a stylist, right? And you pick up the phone or text, the stylist and say, hey, I'm looking for a new pair of pants. Can you send me some? And based on your previous transactions or whatever, you get a pair of pants based on what you like and what you've bought before right at your door. It sounds like Build.com takes like somewhat of the same approach, which I, as a consumer, really appreciate.
Yeah, exactly.
So if someone were to kind of build their own e-commerce app, I know Build.com is kind of an outlier compared to what we're normally talking about, because this is going to be kind of a large scale application, enterprise type of thing, but really the fundamentals are still kind of the same. What are like considerations, I guess, you have to think about? So say if I wanted to kind of build an app that sold some type of clothing or something like that, like what would you need, and kind of, just to kind of get going, like the really basic stuff, what would you kind of need? And then from there, we can kind of talk about specifics and things like that.
Yeah, I think, the way we do everything is we're very centered in the server. So we try to keep as much of our business logic there. So the first thing that you're probably going to be looking at is building out a solid API kind of market that you can use to do all of the actual transactions through. But the obvious things are going to be you need a payment processor. You're going to have a lot of authentication requirements. We're using JSON Web Tokens for our authentication, but you'll want to be looking into something like that. And then the kind of the typical things that you need to go along with I think a normal e-commerce store.
Peter, Kevin, have you kind of built anything e-commerce other than kind of working with the companies? But I know, Peter, you kind of mentioned Trunk Club.
Yeah, Trunk Club was my biggest endeavor into e-commerce. Big enough where we built our own version of Salesforce called the Catalog that tackled like every part of shopping. We didn't have a React Native app at the time, but everything else was React. And it came at the perfect time because we were using Backbone, and I just remember like fetching data from a bunch of different sources because we were microservice based and things would be changing all the time, and then having to like manually manage that data. And it was a lot of data too, right? Like you'd pull down like 50 outfits at a time to render a page, and then 50 more, and then 50 more, because that's what the stylists enjoyed, or that's the experience they wanted. I just remember React coming out, like I think like 2014, or not coming out, but that's when I first started hearing about it and being like, wow, like this definitely just improved so much of my workflows.
Yeah, the paging part is sort of a difficult thing because you don't want to have to you want to be able to just update the list that you already have in memory. And we have seen issues on our app where, especially on earlier versions, where if someone scrolled through 50 pages of because we have sort of an endless scroll going on, that the phone would run out of memory. So a lot of our early work was actually on getting the list view to be able to do clipping before clipping was officially supported, so that you wouldn't overload the phone with all of the rendered rows.
Yeah. That was like so troubling too, because I went through the same thing, and I just remember thinking like, wow, like I can't believe like I'm so cool doing all these like fine tuning tweaks to get this to work the way it should, and just like looking into like UI table view and like how it all kind of like works, and now I just use flat list out of the box and it does 90% of the heavy lifting for me.
Yeah, the flat list has been a really nice addition.
So, concerning flat list, am I the only one that's had some issues with the performance of flat list? I guess so.
What sort of performance issues are you running into?
So if I render a list of anything, maybe 100 or 200, units or larger, or items or longer, I guess you'd say, I'm getting a glitch for every 10 items that are rendered. I get like a pause almost as you're scrolling. I don't know if it was just on a certain version of React Native that I was on, and they had a bug or something. But I was actually teaching a class, and we were kind of going over it, and someone mentioned that they added a large list and they were getting issues. So everybody in the class kind of all did it together, and we all had experienced the exact same thing. And then I was working on a project that same week using Flatlist, and we were rendering about 50 items. It wasn't even that much, and we were having just really terrible performance. And we refactored back into list view, and everything just worked perfectly. Now I do like the API better for Flatlist, but I did have some issues with it. I'll probably go back and try it again. I'm not sure if it was just
have
something.
you experimented with the rendering threshold? Like you can set the threshold so that as you're scrolling down the list, when it gets a certain distance from the end of the list, it starts to make the call to get more items or to start rendering that next set of items. And they changed the API from list view to flat list. And one used to be in pixels, and then the other one is in like number of rows or something like that. So it was a big shift, even though it's the same idea.
Yeah, I mean, we tried a few different things. I probably spent maybe 30, 45 minutes trying to get it to work. It wasn't like I spent a ton of time. I could have probably spent more time, but I'll definitely investigate that for sure.
Yeah, we're actually still using list view for our shorter lists, for our long lists, and we've only converted over some of our short lists to use the new flat list. So that's just how it's worked out so far. So I haven't seen that performance issue yet.
So I guess getting back to the topic, so we mentioned a few things that you need to kind of build, I guess, an e-commerce app. What are some of the I guess plugins and community projects out there that are useful, I guess, for building an e-commerce app, whether it be authentication or payments or just anything to manage users? I know that Shout'em has a really nice way to build an e-commerce app using their Shout'em toolkit, but you don't, of course, if you use Shout'em, you're not probably developing the way you used to. But if you kind of need to just build out something really quickly, or you need to kind of just maybe have a UI that you're not really going to be, I guess, tweaking just a whole lot. You just have maybe a customer that just needs to be able to sell. They have a really nice way to integrate Shopify. But and I know like next week or two, we're going to be having Nofal Khaldun, the guy that kind of built a bunch of payment processors, on here to talk about stuff. But other than that, I would be interested to hear what other people know or about, or what is useful to kind of integrate when you're building an e-commerce site or e-commerce app.
Well, yeah, like you mentioned, the Nofal package. Peter, what was the name again? I forget.
React Native Payments.
Yeah, that one is the one that I've heard of. We're not using that one because it didn't support the payment processor that we're using. However, we're looking to do a PR back to his library to add support for our payment processor. The other thing that we have, just in terms of authentication, there's the React Native Facebook thing, which, because one of our kind of core philosophy is removing as many of those obstacles from e-commerce as possible. So the Facebook authentication is one of the easier ways for your guest, for your user to authenticate. It's not necessarily the easiest for the developer to work with, but it does make it easier on your user. So I recommend people taking a look at that.
Now, with authentication, is that something you normally just handle in the back end, I guess? And is there anything you've kind of used to persist data as far as async storage or anything like that?
Yeah, we're using async storage. Let's see, what are we using? We have a React Native Simple Store is one library that we were trying for some of our async storage. It's just a wrapper around the async storage. We've also used the Redux Persist for some of our asynchronous storage. So depending on which portion of the app we're doing, I think even some of them were directly accessing the async storage using the React Native API.
So that's pretty cool. Have you had any issues using Redux Persist and async storage? It sounds like you've got a hybrid where sometimes you go to async storage directly and sometimes you handle Redux Persist. Is that why you did it? Because you were getting weird issues? Yeah.
No, it was actually just because we had different portions of our app that had kind of different memory needs. So for Redux Persist, we maintain a list of the most recently viewed products for the user, and so that's a pretty significant chunk of it's a whole reducer that's in its own reducer. So we use the Redux Persist and along with the Redux Persist transform compress, which compresses the memory. So we use that to be able to handle the ability to store off a reducer when the app is backgrounded or when it's brought. It rehydrates the app or rehydrates the reducer when the app is loaded. But for things like our web token or something like that, then we didn't put that into a reducer. So we just directly store that. I think there's a couple other small pieces that we directly store too. I think whether the fact that if they've like viewed a particular modal or something like that, if we don't want to continue to bother someone.
Oh, okay, cool. That's pretty neat. So along with that, do you happen to use reselect to cache some of those Redux entities? We're
not using reselect right now. I learned about that actually when I talked to Natter a while back, and I've been looking for an excuse to start using it because it definitely seems like something that'd be really useful. We have a couple places where we have, like for example, an array stored in memory, and then we want to be able to filter that. And so from what I understand, what I've done, my research is that reselect would help with that filtering that portion of that array without having to restore the entire thing.
Yeah, it'll just like kind of cache it on the side, I think. Reselect is one of those things where I used to use it like a lot last year, and then for whatever reason, I took a break from Redux, and now I haven't gotten back into it. I guess sort of the same way you would approach animations. It's like it's like a finishing touch.
Yeah. That sounds like a nice thing. That we're starting to look more into performance. We're starting to get into using things like pure component and trying to tighten the dials a little bit on our app performance. So I think that would be a great thing to bring in.
Yeah, totally.
So Garrett, can you walk us through what kind of the user experience is? So if I'm a consumer, I'm using the app on my iPad or iPhone, and I can purchase directly from there. Is that?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's similar. We've modeled, we've used as an influence like Amazon or B&H, or I think Jack Threads was another one that we kind of looked at as an example. But it's mostly what you'd expect. When you load up the app, you have a few tabs across the bottom. There's going to be a shopping tab. When you load that up, it gives you a whole list of categories, and then you can tap in and see categories, subcategories, and then products. We also, because for us, the ability to change up that home screen is pretty important. So actually, a lot of that information is brought in dynamically. So we have kind of a CMS that we use on the back end, where managers can manage what order their products are shown in, what brands are shown first, and they can do different things to present the best products to the user. And then, on top of that, we have sorting sort low to high, high to low, that sort of thing. But in some cases, we want to be able to promote certain products or bring those to the top. We also have kind of DIY articles that we offer to the user. So there's a whole list of, I think there's videos and text articles that you can look to, see how easy it is to install a toilet or install a faucet or something like that. But once you get into the product that you're interested in, you have kind of a typical large image gallery across the top. And then we have really detailed product specifications. So for example, if you're buying a doorknob, the thickness of the door and how far the knob is set from the edge of the door, those are really important facts that you have to know to be able to select a door handle that will work for your existing door. So we have really detailed specifications, and you might be able to configure 5 different things about a given product, and then you can add it to your cart. We have a thing that's a little bit maybe not normal for product, is we have required and optional add-ons. So for example, if you are buying a bathtub or something like that, it might be required that you have to buy the trap that goes underneath, or maybe that's optional. But there's some products where you can't install the product unless you purchase another product that goes along with it. And so once you add an item to your cart, then we show a screen where you can select those required or optional products, and then you can continue on to the cart. We were talking about this before the show, but right now we have PayPal and credit card as the options for checkout. So if you have an account with us, you can store credit cards, of course, like a typical e-commerce app. You can also log into your PayPal account and you can purchase that way. And then we are currently working to integrate Apple Pay with the app also. So you'll be able to purchase through Apple Pay.
So I know most developers are familiar with building e-commerce for, desktop. What are some of the challenges that you faced going to mobile?
So there's a few different things. So the biggest thing is that, especially when we started, the conventions for mobile layouts and mobile navigation, all of those types of things, they didn't feel as settled as they were with the web. So there was just a lot more thought that had to go into it. And there was a lot more, the touch target has to be this size. And so especially when we were getting started, that we spent a lot of time building out reusable components to make sure that we could, we would follow those guidelines. And I think now there's a lot more UI libraries that you could pull in. So I think there's Pepperoni, and there's a couple other ones. I think maybe even is it React Native Elements or primitives that gives you some of those also. But when we started, those things didn't really exist. So we spent a lot of time figuring out like what our app was going to look like and the paradigms. And it still, in some ways, is still an issue, because we will design a feature for our desktop website, and then we have to figure out how we're going to scale that down and make it look like an app. So maybe that involves rather than having a bunch of buttons on the desktop app, maybe it involves using a swipeable component, or the sort of the little dot button that brings up an action sheet so that users can select something there. But we have, that's always a challenge, is converting the things that have been designed for a desktop or even a mobile website into that app experience.
So before this app was built in React Native, what was it built in? And why was the decision made to use React Native concerning e-commerce in particular?
Well, the decision was made before I started, so I can't completely speak to that. We had a desktop website and we had a mobile website. So those are, it's not a progressive app or anything. It's two separate sites. And then when we decided to build an app, I think the decision was mostly around the idea that we didn't really have people who were app developers. I think we had some experience. They had some experience in app development, but it wasn't an enormous amount of experience with the company. And so the idea of being able to build the app once and deploy it on Android or iOS was a pretty attractive idea. I'd say also too, the other thing that helped is because we already had the existing API, we already have the web services API that we could continue to use with the React Native app. So that probably helped a lot too.
So how have your web services changed to respond to this mobile app? And are you using or experimenting with GraphQL or something like that to target the data downloads?
I would love to use GraphQL. Unfortunately, we're not using it so far. We've talked about it a number of times, but we haven't been able to commit the resources to it. So currently, because the mobile site and the desktop site are actually build.com internal, they're on our own servers. They are actually able to use a separate API from the API that is used by the app. And so we actually have a core set of services, and we have sort of two different APIs that access those core services. The API that I work with right now is only being used for the native app. And so we can, if there's something new that needs to be added that already exists on the desktop site, typically it's just a little bit of work for our platform team to expose that endpoint to the native app. And then while they're doing that, we have the option of saying, hey, this property, this data node, it's a really big wall of text. We're not going to use that in the native app. So why don't you remove that, and it'll lighten our data load a little bit.
Okay, that's pretty interesting. I think that just overall, a lot of when it comes to building, e-commerce in general, it really comes down to kind of having your back end in place really well, because React Native can probably handle an e-commerce app pretty easily. There's not a lot of crazy stuff usually going on when you're kind of building out an e-commerce. You just need to kind of have your basic form inputs and local type of storage, some type of persistent storage, and then some type of payment processor. So totally, I think we covered, really, I guess, most of the basic stuff around that. So before we wrap this up, is there anything that you kind of like to talk about that are gotchas or that are things that you've learned that maybe can help other people that are maybe building their own e-commerce application for themselves, or maybe they're kind of working at a company or they're doing some type of consulting work?
Yeah, let me think about that for a second. The biggest things that I have seen, for the most part, the React Native experience it's been really great to work with. However, there are certain aspects where things get a little bit tricky. One of the things that I've spent a lot of my time with is upgrading our app across versions. And I really would encourage people to, I think they release a new version every month at this point. Try to stay on top of that, because if you let too many versions go by, it really gets pretty difficult to upgrade your app, and you can end up blowing through a lot of time. In some cases, I've even seen where people have recommended, especially for the bigger React Native upgrades, where they said to just create a brand new React Native app and then just copy and paste your code and your libraries over into that new app, because the upgrade process, especially when we converted to React Native 40, that was a pretty painful one. The other things that I would say, another sort of piece of advice I'd give is just when you start building out your app, is trying to decide like what those real low level components are, and making them really just clean, nice components to work with. We had a lot of things where we were pretty new to React when we got into this. And so looking back, some of our components, they're just trying to do too much. So we have components. I was looking at one the other day where it was a title tag, and it is a connected Redux component because it's trying to fetch its own data. And it's like, I probably wrote that thing a long time ago thinking it was a great idea, but looking back now, it's like, wow, it was trying to do too much. And if I just kept it simple from the start, it would have been a lot easier, I think. React Native also occasionally runs into issues with we're using what is it called? The WG fetch library to help with the fetch. And I don't know if it's that or if it's with React Native, but occasionally we end up running into weird issues where fetch just stops working. A lot of times it's when if you're connected to a remote debugger, but we found one issue where we were looking at the history of the issue, and it's been, I think it was first reported on React Native 23, and it's been fixed, and then it comes back every couple versions, but occasionally.
I know that issue.
Yeah, the fetch, I think it's the fetch get, just occasionally just stops working. And sometimes it'll work, and then like the next fetch will fail. So there's just occasionally there's some issues, and you can sometimes you start thinking you're a little bit crazy, but it might be the library in this case.
I literally have like a sanity check like mode where I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do this like literally step by step, just in case, because I've ran into so many of those issues.
Yeah. And so I work remotely and I VPN in, and occasionally I have issues where my VPN fails or the API isn't exposed through the VPN or whatever. And so sometimes that's my problem, but then sometimes it's just React Native or something like that. So it's always interesting.
All right, so I think we'll go ahead and get to the picks. Kevin, do you have any picks?
Yeah, I have three. The first is a quick little post from a couple of years ago. A friend of mine shared it with me this week. It's called the bouncer pattern. And it's a short little article talking about using this little pattern to reduce side effects and return your code to a more readable state without that nesting. So I'm guilty of multiple if statements, and all of a sudden I've got that cone of nesting in my code. And this just is a quick post that kind of shows you how to hoist your conditionals higher up in your function to kind of bail early if you can. Next pick is is a video on O'Reilly's Safari called Deep Dive into Functional JavaScript. And it's a great refresher and tutorial for all things functional. It's the first of a 3-part series that you can find after you watch the first one. It'll direct you to those. But I highly recommend it. And last, as you can tell, I've been doing a lot of leaning into functional programming and specifically with JavaScript these days. I like this utility library called Ramda.js. It's similar to the style of underscore and Lodash, but it has a huge bias towards doing everything in the functional way. Those are my picks.
Peter, do you have any picks?
Yeah, so FlowType just came out with linting. It's not supposed to replace ESLint at all, but it's just a feature that provides more soundness for Flow. So, for example, if you're passing in like a maybe string, right? And typically Flow, like, you'll like maybe string, like token, for example, and like maybe you'll do like if token, then do this, else do that, right? So now you'll get like a sketchy, sketchy variable linting issue, and what it'll say is like maybe you should like improve this by like saying that token is not equal to null or undefined, for example, because that's more sound and safer than just if token, So it's been helping me find a lot of like random, like not issues with your code. It just helps you provide more like insight as to how you should structure and write your code. So it's been like one of my favorite like features of Flow to date.
Garrett, do you have any picks tonight?
Yeah, I have a couple for you. So the first one is a tool that I started using maybe a few weeks ago, and I really have been enjoying. React Developer Tools supports React Native, and it gives a great experience for debugging kind of the UI of your React Native app. It replaces the built-in inspector for the iOS simulator, and it gives you a much better experience. It's really similar to debugging in the Chrome debugger tools, so you can navigate your DOM really easily. You can actually see the styles and props that are being passed to each component, and then you can edit the styles, props, and you can see those edits. Those edits will actually live update the simulator. So it's a really great experience. The other one that I have, it's a non-technical pick. I live up in the Tahoe area, up in Truckee, and so I'm going to plug my town. Truckee's a great place. I think everyone should check it out. We have incredible weather. We have skiing in the winter. We have hiking and trail running and mountain biking in the summer. We're only a couple hours from the Bay Area, so it's a great place if you want to be close to the Bay Area but out of the city. And we have a great community with JavaScript developers groups. We have a technology networking group. We have business networking groups. So we're a very friendly and I think well-organized community for people who are interested in doing startups.
Very cool. It sounds like a beautiful area.
Yeah.
So I have one pick. It is the Advanced React course that was just put out by React Training by Michael Florence and Michael Jackson. Ryan Florence and Michael Jackson. I think they put it out maybe a day before this recording. And I've taken their Advanced React course on site, and it was really, really good. It helped me quite a bit. And it looks like they've taken that exact course and just made it like an online course. And it's significantly cheaper than actually going on site and doing it. So I would totally check that out if you're in React and you're looking to kind of level up to the advanced level. They cover a lot of pretty interesting concepts. Okay, Garrett, thank you for coming on the show. That wraps up episode 74 of React Native Radio. We will see everyone next week.